What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle. Welcome to the Plague Doctor guide for the reworked version of the hero that we just got a couple weeks ago. In this video, we're going to cover all the normal stuff like strengths, weaknesses, how to play the character, dissecting all of the paths and skills and trinkets, and then we'll come up with some cool teams also to help get you started and thinking in the right headspace. For strengths, what is Plague Doctor good at? She is great at damage over time. She can apply all three, usually in good, respectable amounts. That means bleed, blight, and burn. Notice they're in alphabetical order, fantastic. But of course, there's also more to the story. She's a very good character for healing. She has a couple of healing moves with Battlefield Medicine and Indiscriminate Science, and both of those have been historically some of the strongest heals in the entire game. PD's final major strength is her ability to manipulate tokens. She has a couple skills over her paths that can add tokens in different ways, and she also has a few that remove them for different benefits. And now with the update, she's getting the ability to also invert them, meaning if they have something that cancels them, like strength into weaken, for example, she's able to flip those and gain benefits. For weaknesses, Plague Doctor is a stationary hero. She doesn't have any movement skills, and most of her loadouts are designed for her to stand in one place and continuously do all the things she needs to. Her next weakness is that she has low defensive capability. With the massive resist buff from Alchemist gone and her other paths being more desirable, she really doesn't have much in the way of defending herself. She can't give herself a ton of dodge. She has limited access to block, and her HP got a little bit higher, but it's not the highest, which means that most of the time she needs someone to help take care of her, either by guarding her or someone on the team that can taunt. Next section, how to play Plague Doctor. She's one of the more straightforward heroes, thankfully, even with all of her path redesigns. She has a couple really good tools that you can always lean on, which means all you usually have to do is consider your damage over time abilities. For instance, are you blighting? Are you bleeding this time? Are you going to try something with burn? And then you do your best to set her up for that success. The other thing she needs to be doing is healing. I think it's kind of a waste if you don't take any of her really good heal moves when running this character, even just one for whatever reason. Battlefield Medicine clearing damage over time is really nice, and having Indiscriminate Science can be very strong for heroes that generate a lot of positive tokens instantly. Someone like Man-at-Arms or Highwayman have been really good for this over the years. And when you master Indiscriminate Science, it removes negatives alongside it, so that gives you a lot of flexibility in difficult encounters, because a lot of the times there's either a lot of damage over time coming out or some pretty strong negative tokens. Before moving on to the paths and skills discussion, let's take an extensive look at today's sponsor. Thank you, Ctrl-Alt-Deal, for sponsoring today's video, and just to show off a little bit of the gameplay, we're going to run through the final turn of one of the first scenarios, just so you can see everything come together. The game is a turn-based roguelite deck builder, and it's a lot of social manipulation and environment manipulation to get people to do goofy stuff, like kick beehives or eat weird recycled ramen, because that's a thing. So let's take a look. Right here with this, we just ended a turn, and now we're going to go into the final turn. And up at the top, the suspicion meter, you don't want that at 100, obviously, but you always start with like 3 cards. And so we are double checking the objective. We have to get Deckard a friend. That's the mission objective, because when Deckard has a friend, he'll share his coffee maker. So now we're moving this person. Just to show you here, the cards have a cost at the top right, and that means how many cards you have to discard in order to act on it. Then the other numbers that are a little smaller are the social capital numbers. So basically just how friendly someone is with you is how likely you are to get them to do harder stuff. This one only takes 1 point. So if they had 1, they go to 0. If they have 5, they go to 4. And all we're doing is asking this person to move rooms. And finally, the little green eye in the side of the card is just showing how easy it is to detect that action, because you don't want to get caught. Moving this guy all the way here because Deckard likes tomatoes, apparently. So we're going to have him eat some tomatoes. And then after we have him eat the tomatoes, he should swaps or give us the coffee maker. But what's funny here is with Enzo saying those Neo tomatoes look delicious. When we inspected him and spied on him to learn more about him, he actually hates tomatoes. So I think it's even funnier that he's saying they're delicious right now. So unexpectedly, cubic. Yeah, this game's got some interesting little things with the food. As I said, recycled ramen, square, cubic, Neo tomatoes, staplers that have RGB lights, Wi-Fi air horns, like just things you would never expect that need to be made actually exist in this game. And so as you see here, the final turn, we have Deckard enjoying the tomatoes. So now he can pass the generosity around with his coffee maker, because in order to get a group of sympathizers on our side, we have to have it so they are sufficiently caffeinated. That's what one of the missions was. Yeah, this was Mel's mission. And so after that, Mel turns around to help us. A quick recap, you are playing an AI that is trying to not get destroyed by this company. And it all factors around the roguelite deck building elements. And so when you're in between scenarios, you can build your decks up so you have specific cards that you may need, and then there's other ways to get cards while you're playing. So you can manipulate certain devices, appliances, they'll give you extra cards. There's one little thing where you can select cards or store them for next turn. And so these are the personal upgrades. Right now I only had access to 3, but you can build your own set of perks from the list, and I guess you can only have 3 equipped at a time, but the power required seems to go up for some of the stronger ones. And right now the basic ones are pretty simple, like holding a card between turns can be very helpful. For instance, starting hand with a negotiate card, that means you can start building relationships very quickly. Overall, it's a really fun game, so if you like cute, goofy writing and some futuristic ideas that are a little bit offbeat and some cool music, because the game does have some cool music in there, then make sure to check out Ctrl Alt Deal. And thank you again for sponsoring the video. We'll get back to the video now. Real quick, before we do the PD skills and such, let's take a look at the outfits, because I think this is actually pretty fun. This is the basic one. So is the black robe from the first game. Next is the green robe. This also came out of the first game. And it was kind of hard to tell which one was the original. I don't know if it was this one or the black one in DD1. But there you go. Position looks pretty nice. You know, the dark purple kind of makes it look like a raven almost. And I really like the knife and some of the bottles. So she gets some really fun stuff when she changes these. And let's see. Surgeon. Surgeon is just really cool looking. Like, it was so wild when it dropped in. And it's just really fun. I use this like exclusively until we got some new stuff. Got the giant bone sawing knife, and then she's just full of bandages. Like, man, she really is a bleed character. Or she used to be. Then we have Infernal, which I really like the knife on this one. Got a giant, like, almost like half a scissor, but like the blade's facing the wrong way, you know? So, pretty cool. And then you have the Origin. So we're going to leave her in the Origin for this. She has books. Alright, it's the same knife though, I believe. Yeah. Alright. So, P.D. Chan on Wanderer. We have Noxious Blast, pretty much unchanged. I think it does one less blight than it used to. I'm going to try and avoid speaking on the specific changes that happen, because I just want to treat it as a new character. Almost, because otherwise I feel like I'm going to add an extra like 15 minutes to this video. So, this does 5 Blight Mastered, and you get 1 extra duration now if they are comboed, and you get the extra 30 Res Pierce on combo. So combo got really good for this move. Something important to note as well, critical hits do not add 2 rounds of damage over time anymore. Which means that you're not going to crit and hit 5 plus all this other stuff, like a 5x5 or 6x5. You're going to hit 5x3, you just get the extra penetration. And some characters do this better than others in terms of adding extra things now that the crit dot thing has changed, but this one, not as much. Like, the combo's good enough. At that point, you don't really care about the crit. Also, the crit's pretty abysmal anyway. Well, 10's okay. Blinding Gas. If you crit, you guarantee stick the combo. Small change, and it got a big crit rate increase, and I'm talking about the changes. I'm trying not to, but there you go. So, blinds, dazes, and combos. That's a pretty good set of effects. Blinds usually pretty good. A daze can really save you out of some bad situations, and then sometimes you get combo, which is nice. The thing I dislike about Blinding Gas for combo is that no matter what you kill first as an enemy, eventually the corpse gets destroyed, either by time or by yourself, or sometimes by the enemy, and Blinding Gas begins hitting one target instead of two, which is still a good effect, but those backline cleaves aren't as powerful as they could be. Incision, same thing as Noxious. You upgrade it, you get the extra duration on top of the res pen. Pretty solid melee move overall. Battlefield Medicine, one of the strongest abilities she has, or abilities that she has, and it's because removing damage over time is a big deal. Even though the crit dot nerf happened and dots don't stay around as long, enemies in general still have some pretty strong damage over time effects, which means being able to get rid of it off one or even two people consistently is very good. There's almost no reason this shouldn't be on any Plague Doctor build. You can change up the support skills, the attacks, but Battlefield Medicine feels like it always has to be there in my eyes. Auto Prevention is okay. Now that enemies don't get innate res piercing on ordainment, it got a lot better. So now you're not like just mastering it to counteract something. You know, your mastery is actually going to be really good. And so being able to block multiple damage over times by 30% and debuff by 10. Pretty strong ability at that point. I think what would really make this a mainstay on most Plague Doctor builds is if this lasted 4 or 5 turns, just because the extra resist means you don't have to re-up it as often. You can do other stuff, but that might be too good at that point. Most of the time when you want to use Ounce, it's if where you're at has multiple of these effects. I mean, everything has debuffs, so it's always a good reason to master it, but otherwise, if the enemy's just doing bleed and bleed alone, it's still good, but it's not as good. But if you go somewhere like the Fetter, where the enemies do bleed, blight, and disease, this gets a lot of value. And same thing with creature dens. So there's some regions this is very good in, and others it's still good, but like not as good. Plague Grenade is pretty good damage on a 1-turn cooldown, and even though I was talking about how Blinding Gas gets a little bit worse, you know, later on in the fight, Plague Grenade doesn't, or it still loses value too, but damage is usually valued higher in this game than debuffing just by the nature of the combat and how everything works right now. So even though Blinding Gas falls off slightly, Plague Grenade hitting one target is still pretty good damage because enemies on the back usually have less HP. Emboldening Vapors removes Daze and Stun Mastered, and then gives you 2 strength and speed. Very powerful effect. This is a very good move now. So having the ability to just drop 2 strength on someone every other turn, and then even a speed token, you know, this is almost like giving someone the blood combat item. You're missing the crit, but I mean, you clear Daze and Stun, so that's a bunch of really good stuff. Especially with the Daze clear, that means the speed token's gonna stick, because speed counters Daze, but now you get rid of the Daze first. Disorienting Blast shuffles, dazes, and removes Guard, which is pretty nice because Guard isn't the most common token, but it is a very annoying one in a lot of cases. And of course, when comboed, you can get a stun, and that's really good. So decent crit rate when mastered. Being able to shuffle something is probably the least important thing in this, but the days and I didn't notice the week at first on Mastery are both pretty good now. The reason I don't value shuffling that much is because a lot of enemies just don't give a crap when you move them. The cultists do, so moving cultists out of position is really good. Sometimes the bandits, but like in the fetter, doesn't really matter outside of like 2 enemies, I think, out of like the 7. In the tangle, you're not moving them because the drummer gives them all 200 move resist, and in the sprawl, getting them to like rank 4 on like 2 enemies is okay, and you don't want to shuffle the sacrificial. And if you shuffle the shaman to the front, it just Hadoukens you for like half your HP. So the shuffle's not the most amazing, but it can help. But the other stuff's really good. Indiscriminate Science, probably going to call this IS for the remainder of the video. And if you have positive tokens, you remove them for healing, very strong. And if you have negatives, you remove them as well to heal, which is very strong. Has a 2-turn cooldown, and that means you can't throw it out all the damn time, but it's still good. Actually great, still one of the best moves she has. Cause of Death, this one changes, I believe, on every single path, and this is where I was saying that it's kind of a setup move, so you want to make sure that you can stack as much damage over time on the enemy as possible. You don't need 1,000 damage over time to make this worth it. You just need enough to either Death Door an enemy or finish it, or really just do a bunch of damage, you know? So having this hit for like 15 can be enough, you know, on like a size 2, hit a pit fighter for like 20, that's pretty good. Hit a boss for like 35, pretty good. Fighting a custode in kingdoms where they have no death blow resist, and this bypasses block, since it is something that calculates damage independently, meaning that you can hit them with a few damage over times, they get a block plus, and then you just swing through it and take them down. Also, Master gets Execute 1, which is actually really helpful. So being able to finish an enemy with this is good, because before, the biggest thing against it was you'd remove all the damage over time, but they still have death armor, and you know, you're not checking death armor after that. Magnesium Rain, still a great ability, and they actually buffed it. I was very surprised, because this was a move I thought that if you buffed it, it would break it, but they actually found a buff that doesn't break it, it just still makes it really good. So when it's mastered, you're still doing the 3 burn, 2-turn cooldown, removing corpses. But if you're able to get rid of a corpse with it mastered, you clear your skill cooldowns, which can be really good for things like Ounce, right? You can just throw Ounce back to back and have freaking plus 60 resist for like 1 turn, not bad. Get another Indiscriminate Science up right away, pretty cool, and Emboldening Vapors. So there's a lot of good stuff to be had here. For a Wanderer starter team, I always look at the starter team itself, just because it's very well rounded and handles things pretty good, and you're going to be using it for the first few hours of the game anyway. I would recommend trying to unlock the first couple skills on Plague Doctor, and then after you do that, decide if you're going to run either Blinding Gas or Incision, and put in Plague Grenade, just because Plague Grenade's like that much more helpful, especially early game. But if you eventually get Indiscriminate Science, which I think this is her 2nd shrine for Grenade, and I think it's her 3rd for Science, then you run something like this, and this will really last you for like any Wanderer playthrough. It's a very solid skill set. But later on, you can also switch out Ounce for pretty much anything else you want, just because these core 4 are that good. Surgeon is mainly a frontline melee support path, and that's because of Incision specifically, but we'll look at all the other skills too. But I want to mention first the gain on killing blow regen. This really helps sustain her up front, and this is affected by dots killing enemies now. So if you're bleed or if you're using a blight, if that kills an enemy, it's going to trigger the regen. Even if other heroes have it on there too, which is kind of goofy, but there's no other way to calculate it, I guess. And Incision, looking at this, you're still up in the front ranks. It does a little less bleed on hits, and you don't get the penetration. But if the enemy has combo, you deal more bleed, and then Mastered, you deal more burn for the entire combat. That is pretty hot. So this is not that good for regular just road mashes where, you know, you're fighting like 4 brigands. It's not going to do too much there. And there's some fights that punish damage over time, like the Surgeon, but having a ton of dot can actually kind of overpower the regen he gets. This is really good for boss fights. And some of those boss fights, you know, a region boss can go 6, 8, sometimes 10 turns, depending on how bad it's going. And mountain bosses can go, you know, upwards of 20 in some cases. So having the ability to keep ramping this and keep doing more and more damage is pretty awesome. Also keep in mind, Mag Rain is not a path skill, meaning that the more burn you get out of this, you know, it's just AoE, you know, 4, AoE 5, AoE 6. That's pretty good for something later on like Arsonist Runaway. With all that said though, because it doesn't get the penetration, overall I don't think this Incision is like super good. It's got some really cool upsides, and you really want to find a bleed res piercing trinket to go with it. If you can find that, it's going to be really good. But I don't usually like to say, oh, if you have this memory and these trinkets with this teammate and you're playing this confession, then it does well, because I feel like you can just put in all those stipulations for anything else and argue that everything is like OP. So I don't usually go that way. In a vacuum by itself, this Incision is not great, especially because you have to feed it combo. Combo is becoming an increasingly more desired token, and having someone that needs it every turn, almost to like the extent of Leper, means that your options to run other characters like Leper or anyone else that does good things with combo like Grave Robber becomes more limited. Battlefield Medicine heals more based on the amount of, or the different types of DOT the target has. And it's a multiplicative property for each of these 25%. I believe you're going to heal up to close to 40% when this is mastered and you have all 3 dots because of the multiplicativeness. So 75% of 25 is actually, it's closer to 50, right? So that's pretty good. Heal everything, you know, heal someone for 50% damage upwards or up to, and then remove all the dots. Not bad. So this BFM, Battlefield Medicine, is good. Ounce gives herself block and then gives her and the team the extra stun and move res. This is really good in places like the Shroud and the Fetter and the Creature Den. Like, those are really good spots for this. And even something like the Pillagers, if you really hate front mortar, then it's good there too. Unmastered, this is kind of a meme, especially with the long cooldown, but mastered, you get the debuff res and stress resist on top of it, and that makes it pretty damn good. So even if you don't need the other stuff, if you master this, being able to get stress res and debuff res by itself plus the block oftentimes is a pretty good button. So it's worth running mid to late game for her. Vapor's arguably a worse version, just because strength on her now when it's mastered isn't as great as it was before, because old Surgeon, I am talking about old design again, but old Surgeon had a much stronger incision hit. It was like 5 to 11 or something, and now this is 4 to 7, but the strength's not bad. This is more important mastered for her because of the block. Unmastered, I'm probably not pressing this unless I have nothing else, or maybe just the build I'm running does help it. For instance, if I'm running a cultist who can put down Vuln Hex or Runaway is another one, like Runaway Smokescreen doing vulnerable and combo mastered. And then you give this to Leper. Leper hits a massive like 9 damage chop because you low rolled. I'm kidding, you can get up to like 30 or something like that at that point. So there's some pretty good stuff there. Otherwise, not the most impactful move. Block isn't the best token. Strength is only useful on like half the cast most of the time. And probably more than that. I'm underselling it, but yeah. I probably wouldn't run this unmastered is what I'm trying to get at. It's not bad. Much better to have a plan in mind, but otherwise kind of mid. Disorienting Blast, you have to be up front, gives her self-block, knocks the target back, and dazes them. If you crit them when mastered, it immobilizes them. And this is something I kind of dislike. I dislike this on Bulwark Rampart as well, where you can knock them back with a hit and then immobilize them, because sometimes you won't get the knockback and then you get the immobilize after, you know, so they're just locked up front, and that can screw up some stuff a lot of the time. Otherwise, this does damage on hit. It hits rank 3, which is okay. And being able to get the daze can be pretty helpful. So in a lot of cases, this is still a good button to have, because giving yourself block on a squishy frontliner and then able to, or having the ability to daze something, like guaranteed you have a chance of dazing it, is also good. So if you're looking at it for self block and daze, I support it. If you're trying to get massive value out of the knockback, probably not going to happen. Also, this damage range being 2 to 5 is freaking whack. That is kind of massive. Rather it be like 3 to 5. It's 1 point difference, but it's more consistent. Cause of Death. Uses 1. Just 1. Much like the other Cause of Death, you don't need to turn, 150 damage over time into 300, okay? Turning 5 into 10 can get a kill. Turning, if you're on a boss fight, turning 17 into 34 is going to do a lot of damage. So having this in a lot of cases is surprisingly good. She has to be in the front 2 ranks. So Surgeon, this is something we're talking about. The ranks that get hit most in this game are rank 2. Rank 2 gets hit the most, just on average. Most enemies can hit 2 if they're backline or frontline. So rank 2 gets hit the most. After that, I would say it's 3, barely ahead of 1. But rank 1 takes some of the heavier attacks like Docker or Front Mortar. So her needing to be in the front 2, I would probably run her in rank 1 a lot of the time, just because of the danger of being in rank 2 and getting hit more often. What that means for Cause of Death is, if you're not running a dot team, like you can run a bleed team and this is good. If you're running her by herself and she's the only source of damage over time, don't run this. It's usually not worth it. But if you're running a dot team and she's up front with the ability to use this and you master it, then it's pretty good. Otherwise, no dot team, don't run this. And if you focus on just a bleed team, you can actually get away with not mastering this, which in itself is kind of cool. For a Surgeon team, something like this should be pretty functional and fun. So you have Plague Doctor up front, and if you don't want to run Ounce early, then you can run Cause of Death because you have Jester and her. So you might have a chance to just double like a 10-point bleed or a 5-point into a 10, and that's usually enough. But with Flag, you also have the option of mastering it. So eventually you can also double the blight, so that might be a consideration. Or you just don't run COD and you put in Ounce and master it, of course. If you don't want to run rank 1 PD and you're okay with her being in 2, where she might get targeted more, then you can flip some of the other stuff around. You may not need Disso or something else, but Incision, maybe Emboldening, right? So you might keep these 3, but then you can run like IS and Magrain because you get it in 2. So if you want to run something like that, put her in rank 2. That's pretty good. But I might... Actually, it would be rather functional just because Flag has a really good taunt move. But if you put him up front with Wanderer like I originally had, you might want to get rid of Lash and run Deathless. So those are some ideas there, but for the rest of the party, Jester can just pump out combo like no one's business, and he can also blind with Fade to Black, so this is a good early mastery target outside of Inspiring Tune. These are like really good first masteries. And then also you have Harvest to double with Cause of Death, and then you have Encore to make plays happen. And then I'm running Sharp Shot just because if you're starting to have paths, I'm going to assume your account's a little more progressed. So Sharp Shot, you get the reach that this team desperately needs in a couple sources. You have Double Tap, which also combos. You have Take Aim for bonus damage, but then also Tracking Shot for more combos. So you can keep comboing stuff. If you have the Binding Blade DLC and you're not afraid, and you don't like running Flagellant, maybe you're afraid of death, maybe you just don't like the character, you can run Crusader. And Crusader is a very solid frontline option. I have his Banneret here just for, you know, the extra goodies like the stronger heal. But if you want to run him as Wanderer, you can also swap out like Stunning Blow for Zealous, and you might have a chance of getting an extra combo somewhere, plus you have another dot type for Cause of Death. But the goal for something like this is to, I would say though, you actually have too much stress healing, so you can take stress healing off one of these two, you don't need both. But yeah, so running this, a lot of the focus maybe early is going to be having Plague Doctor do support stuff, so either use stuff like Magrain or Disso just to disrupt and hand out some positive tokens, especially if you're running Emboldening. And then once the backline starts cleaning up, you can focus more on offense. Or do offense first, who cares, but yeah. So either PD-2 or PD-1, and you have a few options there for that. Next is Alchemist, the overpowered path everyone expected to get nerfed into oblivion, which actually came out pretty good and arguably still their best path. Noxious no longer does on-hit damage compared to Wanderer, but it gets Blight Res Piercing if they have Bleed on them already. When mastered, if they have Burn, then they get 1 duration as well, and it's already just +1 damage, like compared to the other ones. It's 5 and 6 instead of 4 and 5. Pretty freaking good. Like, you don't do on-hit damage, but the extra damage over time is still very helpful, and arguably better in some cases. Plague Grenade, same thing, res piercing when bleeding, duration when burning, and does 4 and then 5 damage. Ow. Plus these have high crit rates as well. So 20 on Noxious, and then 15 on Plague. So they're going to crit a lot and penetrate resist too. Disorienting Blast is pretty much Firefly in terms of targeting, but like better usage, and you daze the target as well, plus some decent on-hit damage. So there's really nothing complicated about Alchemist so far, which I kind of like, because a lot of the paths after the reworks, you know, have some complexity to them, and this does have some synergy at once. But at the same time, it's not overly complex. Like these are small tooltips and straightforward moves, which I really appreciate. So having some extra burn and then being able to daze them as well is a pretty good move. Cause of Death ignores block when using or when a target's blighted, does 2 damage when they're bleeding, and then 10 crit when they're burning. And then when you master it, the damage, like the base damage of 5 to 8 doesn't go up, but it gets more bonuses on the other stuff. So if you're going to use this move at all, just master it. It's worth it. And now you have all those effects, but when bleeding, you also ignore dodge, and every damage over time effect gives it an extra 2 damage dealt to the target, which means if you have all 3 dots and it's mastered, you're going to do 11 to 14 every other turn with a 30 crit move that ignores defenses. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. This is another reason why removing crit dots was probably desirable in many ways, because you can allow this kind of stuff to happen. Because with these crit rates, you know, if you start critting all your dots and they're there for like 5 turns, it's just a lot of effective damage every time you swing it. The only bad part about this is you have to be in rank 3 for Cause of Death, which kind of screws up the shover in rank 4 gameplay. But you don't necessarily need to run it at all, too. Now, Magnesium Rain. Another kind of bag of Skittles. I don't know what else to call this with all the colors, but you have the ability to do all 3 dots here, so you can Hollow Vessel the enemy. With Mag Rain, it always does burn, but if they're bleeding, or it does bleeding if they're blighted, and blight when they're bleeding. And has a 2-turn cooldown. So if you have one of those, if you have a bleed on the target or a blight previously, and then you throw this, you're going to stick all 3. They're all just going to pop up. When it's mastered, it gets more crit when burning, which is pretty nice. It does on-hit damage, whereas the other ones don't. So not Mag Rain, but Noxious and Plague do not do on-hit damage, but Magnesium Rain does. And so same thing. If they're burning, you get 15 crit. If you master it, everything goes up by 1 point of damage on damage over time. It is at this point I need to remind people that just because you pick a path doesn't mean you have to run all of the path's skills. Just because it's nice to have options, you're not always pigeonholed into them, you're not forced to use them. And sometimes you don't want to, because if you run all of these, you're kind of missing out on some cool Plague Doctor stuff like the healing. So if you want to run it just as a very straightforward, easy to do Plague Doctor, you can run, gotta bring it up. Instead of running COD and maybe Disso, you can run both heals. And that's perfectly fine, right? That's a loadout I showed earlier. That's still really good. If you want to run something like Disso, you know, you can swap out something else, put in Disso. You don't have to run Plague Grenade. You can just take it out, and then you have Disso, and then you have also Mag Rain, you know. If you want to put her in rank 3 for COD, then you probably want to run Noxious, Plague, and then COD, and then maybe like a heal alongside it. And so there you have some pretty good options. The only reason I don't think that this character came out stronger compared to old Alchemist is, for one, the defenses. She doesn't have the insane resist she used to have. But she also doesn't have innate res piercing. She has some pretty good res piercing if they're bleeding, but she doesn't have a free, unconditional 33% penetration. She gets 20 if there's a condition, which means you have to stick the bleed too. We have high crit rates also, so things more often than not will probably stick. So it's still really, really good and almost plays in a similar fashion, just with a little more nuance, but it's not as brain dead busted as it was before. I'm sorry, old Alchemist fans. For Alchemist, I'm going to suggest something a little more advanced just to show you what stuff is capable of. And we're going to go for a Cause of Death Alchemist. So having access to both Blights is really good. Then we have Battlefield Medicine, which is a great heal. And we still have Mag Rain, which gives us a little bit of reach and extra damage over time. And then also we have Cause of Death, because that's what we're centering everything around. But if you don't want to run COD, just take this off, put on IS, and you're chilling, so you don't have to worry about that. And you don't have to run something like I'm about to show. You could run something more in place, static, like the starter team, and PD's just fine there. But just to show what stuff is capable of, this is our Alchemist team. We have Cause of Death because we have Yellow Hand that can bleed targets. Later on, though, you're going to want to pick up Malediction. This is going to be for bosses primarily. And this gives us access to all 3 damage over time types. It procs every time there's damage over time or when the enemy takes damage, which means it can feed back into itself very easily. And it's a good way to spend your up tokens. You can always just keep on stars if you don't want to run Cause of Death, but I think this is a little more fun because I just like dance teams, and I think more people need to try dance teams. So you have Sackstab and Binding Shadows. These move him forward and back, and because of his path, he generates unchecked power by moving. Don't worry, Cultist Guide coming later, but, you know, right now, just make do. And to have stuff to do when we're not stabbing, in case we don't want to move or anything like that, we have Vulnhex, which is still a very powerful ability, and then we have Weird Reconstruction, especially because when you spend up on it, the unchecked power tokens, you remove dots, which is very nice. And finally, kind of the oddball in here is Sergeant. But the reason that I like Sergeant here is because I wanted a backline stress healer that didn't have to move to accomplish their game plan. Like Jester goes forward and back and has, you know, other stuff he can do. Crusader, if you're running Banneret, he can sit in the back and spam, but it's like not as good. And then you have to Holy Lance, which Holy Lance does work pretty well in this team, but you may not have Binding Blade and you may not want to move, you know? So if you don't want to run Cause of Death, then maybe Crusader, but if not, then I consider Sergeant. Arguably the best stress heal in the game when mastered. Unmastered is kind of crappy, but that extra point makes a huge difference. And since he has Sergeant where he can perform in rank 4, you get some other cool options. You get Crush for some extra damage. If there's ever a random combo token floating around, you can heal your party, possibly. Defender, still one of the best tanking abilities in the entire game. Bellow, giving your whole team ahead of him speed. And then, not speed token, just +3 speed. And then removing negative tokens is insane. This is a very good ability, especially mastered. And then Retribution doesn't help PD as much, but even then it's still pretty good for Cause of Death because you get the strength and the crit token. So actually it's very good for that. I think Sergeant's like the perfect fit here. You have someone that can stress heal, protect the team. You have technically 3 healers. You have a consistent combo source from Highwayman. You don't have to run Yellow Hand if you want to run something else, you know, like Wander or Rogue and get combo riposte. That's an option. For this one though, there's some choices. I am using Open Vein because it's damage over time, which triggers the other stuff. Take aim, just always good to have. Tracking shots, quickly becoming one of my favorites. It's a very solid move. And then you can decide how he moves around. You can run point blank shot or duelist or both. You can run both if you want to, but I'm doing point blank on this because I think it's a pretty strong ability overall. And then pistol shot for if he's sitting in rank 2 and you need to snipe something, because as cool as this team is, it kind of struggles on rank 4 damage. So being able to have people that can do something about it is nice. And when a cultist is up front, he can either heal if someone needs it, he can Vulnhex, or if he has the up tokens, he can throw out stars. So very interesting team in terms of what it's capable of. Definitely needs a little bit of practice to make it like super fluid. But yeah, give it a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with something like this, especially because of the Cause of Death. And Occultist, when you get to those boss fights, I think I said it, you swap out stars for Malediction. Because you want one source, usually, of burning up tokens. We have 2 at this point. And stars may be the better move overall. Like, don't get it twisted. Stars is still pretty good. But we're making Alchemist pop off and shine. And in order to do that, we need to run something like Malediction, so she decimates bosses. The final Plague Doctor path, Physician. Kind of got the short end of the stick for most of the changes, which is kind of sad because Physician was definitely her weakest path before, and it got better, but there's a little bit to be desired. So with Noxious Blast, you're still dealing okay blight, but you're weakening the target, and weak tokens have gotten much better since the update, because now they're multiplicative instead of additive. May not sound like much, but it really makes a big difference on some of those strong hits. So I've always been in favor of it, and if you're comboing them, you get the res piercing, but then also a second weak token on mastery. Not bad overall. if this is mastered and you're feeding or combo, you can really saddle or like, you know, tie down an enemy with this. That can be kind of an issue. And that's nice. But that requires a mastery point to really make it shine. Incision, though, is what makes this path really cool and pop off. So Incision just does the normal damage that it does on Wanderer, but you don't get the res pierce or the duration. Instead, this move just combos. Baseline and mastered, it just combos the target. And that is freaking cool. This is a combo every single turn you decide to uppercut with it. And I don't know why. I always do the motion because I think it's a freaking hilarious slashing thing, but there you go. So free combo every time you swing with this. That's almost reason enough to run the character right there, honestly. The path, I should say. Ounce of Prevention is better. Like, it's the same stats, but instead of debuff res on mastery, you get stress res. Really good. And then we have Emboldening Vapors, which is kind of hard to really say if it's like amazing or not. It flips tokens from negative to positive into specific ones, so normally their inverses are what happens. Weaken becomes strength, bone becomes block, blind becomes dodge. That's not a normal inverse, but that's just something, you know, thematic, or it makes sense. You know, you're trading accuracy. And daze gets flipped into speed, which is its counter. When it's mastered, weaken can become strength or crit. That's pretty good. And then you get block plus, dodge plus, speed, and then if you're stunned, you get speed again, which is why it's weird that it says or respectively, but that's like the only way to make this tooltip actually sound correct. The tokens that get flipped are randomized, and if this isn't hitting 2 or more people, it's arguably not worth it. Unless it's something like stun, but then you have to have it mastered, so it's kind of hard to quantify. I don't think it's that good. Like I said, the tokens it picks are random, and, you know, not everyone wants strength, right? Because some damage over time characters don't care. Crits aren't as impactful for dot characters anymore either, so just a few things, like minor things that don't really work out. And it's got a 2-turn cooldown. I think what really does it for me in terms of not thinking this is super great as a move is the mastery doesn't do too much for it. Like, chance of crit is better than no crit, obviously, but you're essentially saying that you're spending an entire mastery point to turn one token possibly into a crit some of the time. Like, that's not very desirable, appetizing. And then also with this, it comes with the idea of like speed order. And there are turns you can get some massive value out of something like this, but then, you know, what if someone gets stunned and the stun turn goes first? Then all of a sudden, boom, you can't flip it. Or if you're vuln and the enemy goes in between and they hit the vuln target, then it's gone, you know? Or if you're blinded and you have to hit something, like you just don't care and you're gonna go for it, then you get a chance not to use that either. So it's like, there are times where the speed order is just gonna completely screw this up and make it so you get like no value. And there are other times where you're gonna wanna take like a suboptimal turn to get value for it the turn after, which isn't a totally bad plan, you know, because delayed value in a turn-based game is something that's really cool. However, I just really dislike this. It feels like a very small impact for spending an entire turn. At least it hits the whole party. This could honestly be like a 1-turn cooldown, and I don't think it would be busted, but that's me. Then we have Disorienting Blast again. So it shuffles, dazes, and removes riposte. Adjacent enemies get shuffled or dazed. And then when it's mastered, the target also gets vuln, and then the adjacent enemies have a chance to get vuln. Out of these, which is nice too, it says that the adjacent enemies still get the effects if the skill misses, so if you miss the first target, you can still splash and get the others, which is cool. And with Disoblast, I think that it's really good that it removes riposte, because there aren't many ways to get rid of riposte, and riposte can be really annoying, so having an ability to deal with that is great. Dazing targets can be very helpful. There's more sources of daze in the game, or there are coming to be more sources of daze, so being able to hit the fabled double daze, which turns into a stun, is more possible. The Vuln token's really good, and I would argue that probably the weakest thing here is the shuffle, just because whenever you shuffle multiple characters, you know, some wonky stuff can happen where, like, people don't really move, or sometimes you move like the entire team. That could be, like, pretty good, but it's mostly the fact that shuffling enemies just isn't that good in this game. Again, as I was saying before with, like, I think a different disorienting blast, there are just some enemies, like entire factions, that don't give a crap when you move them. There may be like one enemy where if you get it from rank 4 to 1, it does something suboptimal, but even in 2, it's got something it can do that's pretty good. And having that as like the main draw is not really it for me, and it doesn't do on-hit damage either. So this is a very niche move. So you're looking to hit this. It can't even hit rank 4. Like, that's the most annoying part. Is this could have hit every rank and it would have been okay, because enemies up front have higher move res, so your chance of moving them around isn't as good. And the best thing to do with this in Wander or on Wander, and then also in DD1, was to hit the rank 4 thing and try and pull it all the way forward, because it can only go forward. And you don't really get that this time, especially with this. So I don't think it's that good. You pretty much need the mastery for it to be even decent, and at that point, it's like you're really spending a mastery to get vulnerable on one thing when you could be doing damage, or hitting Incision, which is a much better button on this pass. So I don't like Disoblast unless you're really running into those niche scenarios where you need to cancel riposte, like Knights in the Tangle, or Pillager Dogs, or a couple other things that get riposte, like the Flares. I'm sure there's a few I'm missing. I'm not going to go through everything, but then finally we have a very weird cause of death. Again, no damage on hits, but it makes it so enemies deal less damage over time to you for 3 rounds, and they receive more damage over time from you for 3 rounds. So it's not turns, where if they get multiple actions on a turn, it fades quicker. No, it's rounds. So that's pretty cool. So having this with like Aspirants, for instance, can be very nice. The Aspirant Occultist that I was talking about earlier, where you can just stack it and have just extra dot receive the whole time. Really nice there. And then Mastered, if you're able to crit them, it applies an additional time, and the additional time and completely ignores debuff res. So that's kind of cool. Otherwise, with Physician, it's kind of a sad story. Like, as a path, it really just has Incision, and Cause of Death is kind of niche, but that's like the other cool thing about it. With Physician, you have a couple options. The easiest, I would say, is to shove her in rank 3 and spam Incision. You can run a normal, simple, chill Plague Doctor loadout after that. You know, you have Plague Grenade just for the reach damage, and you have both heals because they're good, and then you have Ounce because Mastered has stress resist. Or you can swap that to Magrain. Like, this almost plays exactly like Wanderer, except you have more combo options. Same thing with if you would rather put her in rank 4 and forego Incision, and then just use Noxious and spam Weak on everything. Those are both okay. I think the combo spammer is a little bit better, but this, with Noxious Blast, this would be good against some bosses where they hit really hard, so just being able to keep them permanently weakened almost would be good enough. If you're not doing one of those, probably shouldn't take her unless you're doing something very specific. If you're going to run Cause of Death, I would just run Alchemist and not use this. It just feels like there are better options out there. On the one hand, yes, you are dealing more damage over time. This helps her as well. On the other, I feel like the damage over time output of Alchemist is going to blow away how much extra dot received that a target is taking, although it does hit everything. So I guess if you wanted to do that, you can, but otherwise, the one I'm going to suggest here is going to be the combo one, because I think that one's the best, but then also using Emboldening Vapors. Even though I said this move might not be that good, in order to future-proof myself, or, you know, in case I am incorrect about that, we're going to make a combo hungry team and a negative token team. So who is not more combo hungry than frickin' Leper? His combat start blind and his self blind after doing everything is really annoying. So in this case, we can run chop and spam combo from Plague Doctor, so he always has a target for this. You can also flip the blinds with Vapors, and Tempest gives it the extra damage, and since you can flip his blinds into dodge, considering his low HP and speed, can be pretty helpful, and Plague Doctor will almost assuredly go before him the vast majority of the time to make that happen. Then you have Withstand, just because it's a decent self-tanking move, although Intimidate's pretty good too. Solemn for the self-heal, of course. Bash, because I think it's just an amazing move, and if you don't want to deal with flipping blind or it's on cooldown, then you can just bash through it. And then finally, Revenge. Revenge, not the best ability by far, but if you just want to really set up those big chops, on his turn you can have him use Revenge, and then you can flip one of the Vulns, and then also when you flip the Vulns, you can turn it into block and cancel the other. But if you master this, you also get more token interaction. It's just one Vuln now that you can flip, so you get the benefit of the block, and he has a chance of getting crit on turn start. So this is like one of the few uses of Revenge that I can think of, and it's thanks to Physician. Now, this whole idea may go out the window in 2 months when, well, minimum 2 months when they rebalance Leper, but hey, maybe it'll still be good then. For the other characters, just to have a stress healer, I picked Ray, and this could be Man-at-Arms, but, you know, if you're tired of running Man-at-Arms, you can run Ray. This is pretty good with Bannerets. So just standard value. You get a lot of stun chance out of Stunning Blow also in combo, which is nice. And then PD we already talked about with Emboldening. And then the final one is Occultist. I put him on Ritualist, even though Ritualist isn't that good. But, you know, he gets some extra reach and token mitigation again. So this is a team that's very good at getting rid of negative tokens, ideally. And so this can be any attack move. You can do Binding Shadows if you want, but just hit rank 4. I was thinking Artillery plus the blinds. Both curses just to get more up and, you know, deal more negatives to the enemy also. One of your up uses or targets is Weird, just to get rid of the negatives, which can be very helpful. And then if you're just swimming in up tokens, you can master Burning Stars and throw out stars whenever it's up. But yeah, the main thing to do here, you can also run, I forgot, Demon's Pull. You can swap something out for Demon's Pull and have more combo, master it, and get Corpse Destruction. There's a team that's focusing on comboing the target and getting the most out of it, and your backliners are sitting there comboing for your frontliners. So you can get stuns and chops out of Leper, and that should be some pretty good value. So if you want to run Leper and you want to run Physician, this is one of the best ways I would say to do it. Let's take a look at Plague Doctor's Trinkets, starting with Annotated Textbook. Target ally, invert one negative token, so if you use an ability on them, it can invert a token 65% of the time, or give them 1 stress 5% of the time. Not bad in most cases. So sometimes you might heal something with Battlefield Medicine. If they have like a Vuln, you flip it to a block. That's pretty good value. 1 stress is a little nerve-wracking, or maybe just nervous, not nerve-wracking, but getting 1 stress 5% of the time is not the worst thing. Then you get 50% bonus healing from restorative items being equipped. There are now more restoratives in the game, as they keep adding tags to things, so this gets more value. And then turn start, if she's first, she has a 33% chance to get vuln, which is, again, not that bad of a thing. So this trinket overall is pretty powerful. Bonus healing, and more often than not, you're flipping negatives. And the downsides are pretty minimal, especially considering if you run characters faster than her, the turn start vuln shouldn't matter. And even if the turn start vuln does matter, it's only a third of the time. Frog in a Jar, the early experiment. 1 extra blight dealt with a noxious item equipped. That is really good. So anytime you have like a spore grenade or a otherworldly fragment, just anything that's noxious, will give her extra blight. Apply on crit, invert 2 positives. This one's a little bit trickier to do because oftentimes when you're hitting enemies and stuff, critting is really nice, but for instance, dodge goes away when you swing, so I don't think you can invert that. And then also, unless they have an extra dodge, of course, but then also block. A lot of her stuff does damage on contact, so having block not get a chance to flip either isn't the best thing. This is better for Alchemist overall, just because the blight attacks don't do damage on hits, but you still get the extra blight dealt. The other paths can make do with this, but I think this is definitely the best for Alchemist and maybe Wanderer. Final Trinket, Storage Room Key, is pretty powerful, but also it's got the biggest downside. And actually, I need to go back with Experiment too. So getting moved by the enemy, chance to give you a DOT, which, again, not the worst thing in the world. And I'm not sure if this is resistible or not, just because some effects that give dot are resistible and some aren't. Thank you, Red Hook. Otherwise, it's not that big a deal. But yeah, Storage Room Key. Ounce of Prevention gives block on target. Ounce of Prevention is a party buff skill, so just block on the whole team. That's pretty awesome. Emboldening Vapors, whoever gets it gets a 2x3 regen. Very powerful again, especially if you consider the memory where you get bonus regen dealt, but then you're kind of basing it off of trinkets. So it's like really cool when it happens, but definitely not something to rely on. But being able to give buffs with a regen is really awesome. The one I'm very surprised stayed in, because this was in testing, and people think that I can tell Red Hook what to do and they do it. I specifically said I didn't like the speed per med gear, but they kept it. There you go. Otherwise, it's a very powerful effect. Med gear already for the wagon is very good. Like, they're some of the highest value items that you can have, especially in Kingdoms. Being able to get 1 speed per each one is kind of crazy. The reason the reanimated rabbit was so good as a pet was specifically because it gave you speed. The bonus HP is really good late, but being able to get 1 or 2 speed, even with nerfed ordainment, but especially with old ordainment, but being able to get 1 or 2 speed changes so much. And they gave it to her on a trinket. However, missing is a guaranteed -1 speed for 3 turns. So it's not permanent. It is 3 turns. That can still, that can be a hindrance. I know this line of thought's been in since DD1, where people think, oh, I want my healer to go last so they can react to what's happening. And that's not always the best thing to have, because sometimes you might be too slow and someone on Death's Door has damage over time and they get the minus speed because they're on Death's Door. And you won't be able to heal them because you're not fast enough because of something like this. Otherwise, powerful trinket. But just to show you what I'm talking about with the Stagecoach gear, the restoratives are things like the Kyrogen's Mixing Kit, insane. The operating table is pretty good, gets you some good value. The bottle case, stacking powders. The Alembic and Retort, being able to make powders. And then there's a compress kit, stacking poultice. The Mortar and Pestle, which is somewhere. Yeah. The Mortar and Pestle making extra... I'm sorry, I had to find it. Like, my OCD, ADHD would not let me skip it. But yeah, so being able to make poultices and get a bonus for that's really good, like extra speed. And then forgot about medical equipment is okay, but still good. And then medicine chest, which is something I used to sleep on, but is actually really good. And now you can have a bunch of stuff that gives you 1 speed plus all the other benefits. So it's a very good trinket and effect. All right, well, that's gonna do it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. Any other questions, concerns, or synergies, ideas, strategies, insights that I missed, feel free to share them with the people around you. The next guide coming up is Runaway. After that is Occultist, and then we'll circle back to Man-at-Arms if I still have time before Hellion and Leopard. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.